Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. It is a brand new edition of Bets and Banter. My name is Liam, and I pick fights on this channel each and every week. I'm coming at you real quickly after I was here just yesterday for the first look. We're now back for Bets and Banter. I'm going to close up shop this week with a final post-weigh-in look, but I wanted to come to you guys with some updated research as well as with our guy, Just Win Baby. You know him, you love him, frequent friend of the show, back on the show once again. How are you, my man?
Yeah, good, bro. Coming off a good week last week. Seems like everybody had Joe Pyfer by sub. So we was all eating well this week. Love this card. Can't wait to break it down. Just a quick shameless self-promotion. I'm a patron for November. If I don't profit in November, I'm giving refunds out to everybody. Patrons, $12, bets, Discord group, the rest of it. So if you like it, sign up. Link in the bio. Let's go, bro.
Let's do it. And as usual, guys, if you tune in to the first look, we start with the main event. But if you guys have ever checked out a Bets and Banter before, we're going to start with the first fight of the night and work our way on up this card. And if you guys have been watching this show for a long time, you know that we really respect the game of Emily Ducote. We think that she's a solid fighter. And as far as Ashley Yoder, I think she's kind of a part-time fighter. I thought that she had a pretty favorable stylistic matchup at the time against Angela Hill, where she was a plus 330 underdog. And I've talked about before, Angela Hill sometimes takes herself down. And if you watch that fight, she attempted no real takedowns, but Angela Hill still took herself down a few times trying to finish Ashley Yoder. So Ashley Yoder, I just don't really see it from her offensive standpoint. She's 3-7 in the UFC, no real wins to speak of over that course of time. So I think she's due to be cut at any point. They offered her another contract. I feel like it's kind of just a formality that if she can't compete at this level, she's eventually going to get cut. But she's probably a good B-side, goes out there, fights for a hard 15. But I think Emily Ducote is actually better on the ground. I think she's better on the feet as well. So I like Emily Ducote to win this fight, but at the money line price, it's pretty cost prohibitive for me. What do you think, Rich?
Yeah, the money line price is disgusting. I do agree with everything you've said, but I do think she's a parlay piece. And I think she's probably, I hate to use the term lock, but she's probably lock of the card. Ducote, Yoder, she's been off for a couple of years. She's had 2 shoulder surgeries in that time. She was never great anyway. She's got a lazy jab, a low kick. She kind of likes to spar in there. She'll attempt some desperation takedowns, but her wrestling isn't great. Her whole process isn't great. I think Emily could even get her out of there, man. And I think that's a sharp play considering Yoder's never been finished. In 8 of her losses, it's always been a decision. Even when she fought Mackenzie Dern back in the day, Mackenzie couldn't get the sub. But I think Father Time gets to everyone. She's 35. You add in the injuries, the time off. Ducote's got some good stand-up. She's got a good right hand. And she's got a wrestling base, man. So I don't think Yoder's going to have any success in the wrestling, which leads me to believe it's going to be a stand-up fight. And I think over the 3 rounds, Emily will crack her with something, sheer shell up, and it'll be a TKO victory. That's what I'm predicting for Ducote, man.
Yeah, we've seen really nice stoppage wins for Ducote prior to getting to the UFC. And we just saw last week, huge favorite in the UFC, Kanako Marotte. What gave me some confidence to fade her? It was Emily Ducote constantly threatening with arm bars from the bottom position, showing that even if she's on bottom, she's going to be active. She's going to make it a sweat and she's going to be able to compete. So I just think of her as a girl that's competent in all phases. I don't think if it's one takedown, Ashley Yoder is going to win this fight, for example. So I just think that Ashley Yoder has a really thin margin of victory. I think she'd need to get multiple takedowns. I think she'd need to ride out some top position here. And I think that more often than not, she's going to be getting lit up on the feet, to your point. But I think that if she tries to engage on the mat, I wouldn't be surprised if Emily Ducote is actually able to leverage her grappling advantage in this matchup. So let's see how it plays out. But Emily Ducote, ITD,
Yeah.
me as well as a potential.
So, just to add to that, if you want to beat Emily, you got to be physical and you got to bring the pressure, man. Get in her face. And like I said, Yoder just likes to spar in there. She's going to do neither of those things, and she's going to be a sitting duck, man.
And we just saw how good Lupi Godinez looked in her most recent fight. So I feel like it's no skin off her nose that she lost that one. Lupi seems to be developing as a prospect. And so she's had some sketchy footage along the way, but she's still young and she's very physical, to your point. So just a different kind of archetypal style matchup than this. And I think Ashley Yoder, most of her takedowns are from the upper body. And I think they're a little bit sloppy as well. So with that being said, we can move to the next fight where we've got Chris Gutierrez taking on Alatengheili. And I was going to be betting on Montel Jackson, full disclosure, when that matchup was booked with Chris Gutierrez. It was about a minus 170 favorite. And I just like that price on Montel. I thought he was going to win the fight at a pretty decent clip. I thought he had more paths to victory against Chris. Now, obviously, this is a different matchup, right? Alatengheili, not the same kind of threat on the feet necessarily that we've seen from a guy like Montel Jackson. However, we've seen Alatengheili go out there and produce some decent results in the UFC. Looking at his win-loss record, 4-1-1. Draw against Gustavo Lopez, a little bit sketchy. He did have a win against Dana Bakary. I believe that was in China. That was certainly some controversial scorecards. I think people might have scored that the other way. But in any case, he was able to get takedowns and use that to leverage it for a victory. I think Chad Hellinger is a pretty decent fighter. I think he's well-rounded. I think he's got skills in all positions. And so I thought that was a pretty credible win from him as well. I know a lot of people will dismiss that. I know Chad's not the most physical guy. He's 35 years of age, but he's actually pretty skilled and tactical. He's got wins over Brady Highstand and a few other UFC level guys. So it's not a pushover by any means. So when I just look at this matchup on paper, I think Chris Gutierrez rightly favored, better fighter. We've seen a kicking archetype in who was that? Drawing a blank on his name right now. Casey Kenny just absolutely kicked Alatengheili to pieces. But that was a few years ago. He's been training at Fight Ready. I think he's probably getting better over time. And he also has the wrestling in his back pocket here, where we've seen Cody Durden get a 10-8 round on this guy up a weight class. So I feel like overall, I'm just leaning towards the underdog or passing here at the big favorite price on Chris Gutierrez, because I just like to get on the other side of his fights. And even Dana Bakary, I bet him against Chris, and Chris knocked him out, but I was there live, and Dana Bakary, I thought, was having a lot of success. I was, excited watching it, and then I couldn't believe my eyes when he went down. So shout out to him, though. It was one of the only highlights on a pretty boring fight card. So God bless him for it.
Yeah, I remember that fight. Dana was doing well, man, and I do feel like Chris was lucky with that KO. He's always had suspect takedown defense, Chris. If someone was going to fight him, that's how I'd advise him to go. Take him down. He's very susceptible to it. And like you said, man, what's his name? Alatang. He has been fighting at Fight Ready with Henry. I do think he's going to employ a takedown heavy game plan. So yeah, this could be a big upset on the card, man. I'm not going that way myself. Gutierrez, he's just been awarded his brown belt. Like I said, I think Alatang is going to push the wrestling, which will allow for submission attempts. So at plus 1600, I've put a quarter of a unit on it just for the crack. The line's wide. I like to have a little bit of something on most fights to make it fun. So yeah, that's what I'm going with. But I could see an upset here, and the line's been fluctuating all week, man, going up and down. So money's coming in. So yeah, it's a good one to watch, man. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and I think this is a fight where, despite people expecting grappling / wrestling from the Alatengheili side, I don't think most people will expect him to win by sub. And so I think the ends by sub might be a really wide price as well when that comes to market. So might wait and take a look when they do bring that to market, what I could get my hands on there, because I think that's an interesting angle from you on the Gutierrez side. I did not know about his promotion, so I'll look into that a little bit as well. But we can move along to the next fight unless you have anything to add here.
I was just going to say, it's weird. They're both from Iridium, man. And I know Iridium have done this before, the management, where they match up their guys against each other. But it's just backwards.
Yeah, they cash 2 checks.
Yeah.
It's a guaranteed win bonus. Guaranteed win bonus, Rich. You got to remember that.
Yeah. I don't like that model, but here we are, man.
Yeah, me either. I don't know that the managers are doing much of anything for him, but God bless. What do I know? Next up, we got Irina Alekseeva taking on Melissa Dixon. And I don't know if I even got to the bet, but I remember in my write-up I had mentioned, if you're on the dog, Alekseeva against Edgar, take her by sub, because I just felt like Edgar's a girl that engages in the wrestling and the grappling. We saw her in that, very compromised position against MBS, no matter whether you thought she, tapped or not there, the phantom tap. But in any case, she was in a compromised grappling position there. And we know that Alekseeva is a long, awkward girl, and she looks to pull these, crazy submission attempts. We've seen that regionally, and she just seems to be a girl that presents a danger factor. She is a little bit wild and reckless. I do think that her striking is a little bit like something you'd see on a street fight, but it's also she's out there throwing and trying to do damage. So on the Melissa Dixon side, I did watch some footage between the last time that we spoke, and I didn't come away altogether super impressed. I don't think she's a bad fighter, but I wasn't blown away either. She seemed like she's at times content to just hang out on top in the guard. I think against this opponent, that would probably be a mistake. And I think that on the feet, she just seemed like a pretty average fighter to me in terms of the WMMA. Neither one of these women has a ton of experience, but one of them has already been there in the UFC against an 80cc grappler and got the submission win. So for me, it just would make me lean, if anything, towards Alekseeva being a slight favorite here. I believe she's flipped to the underdog in this spot, plus 125. So yeah, I'll kind of wait and see a little bit on this one, but I feel like the more dangerous fighter, a little bit more proven commodity right now is Alekseeva. So probably take that side, but I'm going to do a little bit more due diligence digging into the social media and some other things. Cause for me, I just was able to watch her fights on YouTube, but I did think that she showed some promise, but still she's a pretty green fighter. So I don't know what she did to deserve to be favored here. What do you think, Rich?
Yeah, I think Dixon's pretty low level, man. And like you say, I'm not sure why she's here. I do think she's going to get the Octagon jitters, this being her debut. It's a big occasion from her. Apparently she's a brown belt, Pepe told me, but she's from the UK. I'm not sure who's given her that. So I don't think that's legit. And on the Russian Ronda side, I actually like it by TKO in this one, which was plus 1100. I think it's lined stupidly wide. Yeah, her striking's wild. It's unorthodox, but I actually like that about her. She throws some flying knees, which I've seen her connect with. And she will throw some heat, man, albeit being wild and not very technical. And if you go and watch Dixon against Carmona, which is on YouTube, if you all want to go and watch it, she was getting pieced up, man. No head movement. She's very green on the feet. Dixon is. It seems her wins are coming from taking people down, getting the mount on 0-1 girls. She's a can crusher. So yeah, I think I've got to take the dog shot, like you said, on the person who's been there before. I see it as Dixon can stay on the feet and get lit up, or she can desperation take down and get her leg chewed off or an arm bar or some shit. But I'd go on the Alekseeva side on this one, especially at dog odds, man.
Our guy Moyes has to support his Eurotrash sister here. We're wishing you the best of luck, brother. It's just a fight where I'm not super bullish, but again, you've got a fight where both of these women are likely to try and take it to the ground, but against a lot of her opponents, they seem kind of clueless on the mat, and we're just letting Dixon advance or letting her hang out and guard. And we've seen that Alekseeva is going to at least try and be aggressive, try and attack with submissions off of her back. So I don't think she's going to let her settle and be comfortable in the top position. So if you're thinking about things that make you worried, you want to be able to be comfortable, hang out on top. And some people will let you do that, but I don't think Alekseeva is one of them personally. So next up, we've got Terrance McKinney taking on Brendon Marotte. I did not listen to the commentary, but I did watch a handful of these guys' fights. Didn't seem like he was fighting the highest level of opposition. Did seem like he was willing to go out there and throw hands. Kind of to your point about Dixon, few of those times just ending up in the top mount position, throwing away. But I'll let you kick this one off, my man. How do you feel about this fight? Do you feel like there's any betting value? Because for me, I try and stay away from Terrance McKinney fights like the plague because I've just not had great results with the guy.
Yeah, don't do that to me, bro. I got nothing. Terrance, round one. I don't see anything from this kid that would worry Terrance. It's going to be, pick your poison, KO or sub. I want no part of it. There's better bets to be had on the card. I do think that the UFC is gassing Terrance up. In his last fight, he got a pushover. In this one, he's getting another pushover. So, he's already got an inflated ego if you see him around Twitter. The guy is very, very prevalent on there. But yeah, I'll be looking to fade him in the future, but not in this one, man.
Yeah, I'm trying to look to see where my previous bets are on McKinney. I don't know if they're included in this list or not, but I think I tried to bet for Ziam against this guy. Like I've just tried to pick my spots with him and gotten him wrong. So at this point, I'm probably going to start passing overall. But I did get him with Bonfim. I did get you with Bonfim, McKinney. Never forget that. So that was a cool one. Got him all the way down to the round and the method there. But in this spot, I'm kind of agreeing with you. You know, McKinney's had 20 professional fights, most of them at a higher level than this guy. So not super bullish on Brendon in this spot. Tainara Lisboa is next up in the women's bantamweight division. She's taking on Ravena Oliveira, and Ravena Oliveira looks to have gone through a total transformation in the last 4 years, because you look at that footage that you found online. If you guys are like me and you search this girl's name on YouTube, you saw her getting Ezekiel choked, not only from a girl in the top full guard position where she was starting to get a little bit worried, but then she ends up reversing position, getting on top into the full guard and getting submitted via Ezekiel choke. So she looked very susceptible on the mat at that time. She's now a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I did see that on her social media. However, her grappling game still doesn't seem like the most standout to me. It more so seemed like girls were kind of breaking when she was getting off on her offense, and when they were starting to fatigue, she was able to get the round 3 submission in the more recent fight that I watched. But again, it just looked like the woman had sort of broken already. She took her to the ground, easily took the back and finished. But I did think that I liked what I saw from Tainara Lisboa last time out. She did a good job. I bet her in that spot. I bet her inside the distance. And I thought that her submission game was going to be live there. She's a purple belt taking on Jessica Rose Clark, just a girl that I had been looking to fade, a girl I had been looking to fade by sub. So in this spot, I'm not, looking to get involved with this huge money line price. I do think if there's like one category of underdog that tends to just exceed people's expectations, it's Brazilian girls that look terrible on the regional scene, that get on the right steroid regimen, they get with the right coaching staff, and people start taking them a little bit more seriously. And then all of a sudden they show up in the UFC and they're Natalia Silva or they're one of these other girls. But I do think that Lisboa, she's a presenter, I believe, for the Portuguese network for the UFC. I think she kind of has a few other inroads into the marketing, the media side of the game. And so I just feel like she's a little bit more of a marketable commodity. I feel like Ravena Oliveira needs to get some more experience, needs to have some fights like this at the higher level. I think the UFC would be happy to have her on the roster and win a couple fights down the road. But it just seems to me like a fight where Tainara Lisboa, because of her experience against UFC level girls in striking disciplines, as well as her experience fighting Norma Dumont in MMA, fighting real girls along the way, I just think she's probably a little bit more seasoned, a little bit more ready to go for this fight. How do you feel about this one, Rich?
The one thing I'll say is, if you're thinking about betting Lisboa ITD, don't do it. Chances are you're likely to get burnt. I know a lot of people are probably going to try and do that. They're going to try and cut the money line and be cute and bet ITD at minus 125, or at least it was when I last looked. Don't do it. Oliveira, yeah, she got Ezekiel choked. Wasn't a good look at all. But I do like her process in her fights, man. She does have decent cardio. She will throw hands. She is tenacious in that respect. And what I like from her in this bout is she cage pushes. Jessie Jess is a complete head case and she's shit. And even she got cage time on Lisboa in that fight. She was able to burn off minutes off the clock, pushing her against the cage, and Lisboa didn't really have an answer for it. So yeah, I do like Lisboa. Again, she's another one prevalent on Twitter. Nice girl, the rest of it. And she is the better Muay Thai striker, but it's MMA, it's women's MMA. It's going to get sloppy. I haven't got the balls to bet Oliveira, but just give me weird vibes about this one. So I'm staying away. Like I said, my only advice would be don't go for the ITD on Lisboa, man.
And if I'm not mistaken, was Lisboa an underdog against Jessica Rose Clark? I think she was. I'm just trying to do this from memory here because it did not come up in Bet MMA, but I'll pull it up here. Tainara Lisboa opened plus 135, closed minus 127. So the market flipped her to the favorite against Jessica Rose Clark. But yeah, she actually opened the dog there in that last matchup. So now you see her go from a plus 135 underdog to a massive favorite in the UFC. that is something that will always give me hesitation from a long-term market perspective. So sometimes people in the comments ask about, what are you talking about when you say the market? These are examples. The market prices you out one time against a girl who's on her way out, in Jessica Rose Clark, and really hadn't been showing her best product in the UFC. And they're saying at worst, she's, a close underdog, but then she flips to the favorite. Market got more bullish on her as they got more information, but now they're super bullish on her against a girl about whom we have very little information. So whenever there's a lot less information to go on, should naturally push the line just a little bit closer to that 50-50 distinction. So just a couple of things to keep in mind from a long-term perspective. But that being said, let's move to the next fight here, where I believe we're going to agree on Darren Elkins and TJ Brown. And guys, listen, it brings me no pleasure to do a breakdown like this. I hope that I'm wrong about this one, but I think that this is, the end of the road for Darren Elkins. I feel like he's a guy that's been hanging on by a thread for quite some time in the UFC. He's very old for this division. This is a division that tends to eat, older fighters and just eliminate them from the roster at a much higher clip. So it's remarkable the longevity he's had. He's been around for a long time. He's fought a lot of great guys, but they've been matchmaking him a lot softer recently. And I do think that this is another example of that. TJ Brown's not the most vicious guy they could have gotten on the roster. But if you've been listening to TJ Brown's interviews, he said, listen, I'm not satisfied with my place in my career. I'm not satisfied with where I'm at with my health, with my family, with my life. And TJ Brown is kind of a bonehead, but he also said, I haven't been drinking. I've been taking my training more seriously. He was cornering Bryce Mitchell at a recent win for him in the UFC. So the guy's being surrounded by other people taking the game seriously. And I feel like when you see him go back to those localized training routes with Bryce Mitchell, lifting weights out in the, the farmyard or whatever you want to call it, God bless him for it. But I feel like we actually will see a better performance here from TJ Brown. I've always said, it's hard to rely on guys with bad brain thinking at chalk prices. So I'm not even advocating the minus 200 or whatever it is on the money line, but I do think that TJ Brown inside the distance is probably the play, because I think he's probably going to hurt Darren Elkins badly here. I think he could win via cut stoppage. I think there's a chance he could submit him as well when they're fresh. So just a lot of red flags, I feel like, for Darren coming into this fight. And I'll let you take it away, Rich, but I just don't like this fight for him, and we wish him the best health-wise, but I just don't think he's long for the mixed martial arts cage.
Yeah, we definitely agree, man. And liking a fight is one thing, man, but to bet on him because of that is just stupid. I will be fading Darren Elkins. He had a tore MCL in his last fight, a fractured fibula. Going his IG, the guy was in a wheelchair after it. He's all of 39. He's out there looking like Ricky Glenn. I kind of put him in the same category. It's all right having the mindset and wanting to fight, but if the body's not there anymore, that's just the way it goes, man. Scar tissue as well, that's another thing to consider. One clean strike and, Darren's just going to open up, fucking blood everywhere. Fight could get stopped. So I really like TJ by TKO. It's 300. ITD to cover your back just in case there is a sub. But I see people taking shot on Elkin here. They're reliving the golden era, where he has these comeback wins and gets the finish later on in the fight. But them days are over, man. He's had his resurgence in his career. Now it's the demise. Bet accordingly. TJ Brown, yeah, he can be a flake, but in my opinion, Darren Elkins is a body at this point, and TJ Brown better not let me down, man. And that's another thing I'll add. Go check my Twitter, man. I think I've had 8 bets on TJ Brown's fights, and I've never lost betting him, man. Always won. So may that continue.
You can always predict the bad brain thinking before it happens. So excellent job. But I will say, I think that it's not always a time where you want to bet a bad fighter against another, but it's just timing is everything in mixed martial arts. It's a common theme on this show. And I think maybe if this fight was happening 5 years ago, we're having a totally different conversation. But the guy that I've seen the last few times out there, I feel like I would favor TJ Brown over that guy. And that's just the God's honest truth. So we wish him the best, but taking TJ Brown here. And I'm also going to be riding probably that ITD, but definitely going to be looking towards the prop market here. Next up, we've got Christian C-Rod Rodriguez taking on Cameron Saaiman. And Rich, I'll have you take this one away first, my man, because I know you've had strong thoughts on this one on Twitter. Whether you're betting it or not, I just know that you've had a lot to say.
Yeah, I did call out C-Rod this week for being mush of the week. I am backtracking on that a little bit. You know, these mush of the week things I put out are just a playful thing. It doesn't advocate a bet on either side. I do like C-Rod, and I even like him ITD. Since my podcast with Pepe, I went back and did a bit more tape, and I think I was a bit disparaging towards his stand-up. I seen this as a binary fight. I was like, it's either C-Rod by taking him down and getting his grappling going, or Saaiman lights him up on the feet. Because Simon's a bad grappler. Go watch his fights with like Kozlo, who was short notice and plus 300 in that spot. He was going to win a decision, man, if it wasn't for him gassing out. He's an awful grappler. C-Rod sub is definitely on in this one. I would be taking it, but I'm scared that he's going to TKO Saaiman. You know, he's at Rufus Sports. He's got good stand-up. He's got strong striking. You know, it's very methodical, laid back. But when he does strike, you know, he sits down on his punches and he goes for the kill, man. So, yeah, I do like C-Rod. I'm not taking the money line, not keen on it. Small shot on the ITD. I might add sub rounds 2 and 3 just for the number, but they're going to be D-Gen plays. So, yeah, I like C-Rod in this one. Initially, it was the offensive wrestling. I didn't think he was going to get that going. But like I said, having re-looked at the bout, I don't think he necessarily has to wrestle to win in this one. So, yeah, I think C-Rod's kind of a smash spot in this position, man.
Yeah, the things for me that stood out when I looked at this matchup, you know, 3 times in a row, this guy was rolled out there with DDP, same card. And it was on the undercard, right? And he was being brought along, you know, as like the featured attraction, right? He's kind of mini DDP. He's the other team CIT representative in the UFC, and he's looked up to him. He's been training in the same camp since he was a youth. So a lot of good things on the Saaiman side, but I didn't think against Terrance Mitchell, he looked like, you know, this lights out hammer, whereas Raul Rosas Jr. was like, get over here, kid, bang, and just like disrespected the guy, just did whatever he wanted. I actually thought it was a much more honest fight with Saaiman. So I thought that was interesting on rewatch. I also think when you're looking at this fight, you know, C-Rod was impressing me before he got to the UFC. I had some tape on him from when he had fought Reyes Cortez and when he had fought a couple guys regionally. And I had just thought to myself, you know, this guy has some skills in the grappling. He's very young and he's putting it all together. When you look at age advantages, something I always talk about on this show. And I know that people don't always take it seriously, but there's certain things that I try and take that are outside of my analysis, right? That are things that are long-term, and age is a long-term thing that you could just study and see how it plays out over time, right? It's one of the only things that we get about these fights that's super measurable over time. However, where is an age dynamic really not beneficial for you? If you're the younger guy and you're both 25 or younger, it's like, then it's not really beneficial to be younger at that stage of the game necessarily. The reason being, you can continue to develop physically as a male well into your 25, you know, like as you're 25 years of age, that's when you typically stop seeing physical development for males. But that's the point, you know? So it's like, this guy could still be developing physically. He could end out as a featherweight, right? He's still a young guy, 22 years of age, and he's been training for a long time. So maybe this is just going to be his natural weight forever. But in any case, I look at it and I say to myself, C-Rod at 25 years of age, going on 26, he's probably just got all access to his natural man strength that he's going to get. On top of that, he just did this to Raul Rosas Jr., where he outlasted him. He was on the receiving end of some bad positions, didn't panic, stayed pretty composed out there. So there's some things I really like about C-Rod from a long-term perspective. He just seems like a guy who's putting together the right set of skills. He's gone around to different gyms putting in work. However, the other thing is, I think of both these guys as like talented prospects that I've kind of been keeping my eye on, and one of them's been heavily favored in his UFC fights. That's Cameron Saaiman, right? He's been going out there expected to win, getting the wins mostly in dominant fashion, and then when he puts himself on the ropes with a bunch of fouls, he's able to go out there and get the stoppage, right? So the kid's definitely made some young, boneheaded decisions, but he's shown some growth over the course of his career. I do think to myself, though, Christian Rodriguez, do they want to just stunt this guy's momentum after he just got the big win over Raul Rosas Jr.? I'm not necessarily sure about that. I think they might want to capitalize on that and continue to build up his star and his stock a little bit, because he seems like a kid who's putting in the work and putting himself in the right position. So I'm probably expecting a close decision here. But it's a really fascinating fight for me. I'm going to do more tape before I decide on this one, but my lean is towards C-Rod. He's got some of the natural advantages for me. A little bit older, similar height for these guys. He's got the 4-inch reach advantage. So to your point, if it plays out on the feet, maybe he's able to touch him with that boxing from a little bit further away, working with those Rufus Sport guys. I got respect for their striking on the feet, and he already had good grappling when he got there, as far as I'm concerned. So it should be a fun fight. Good prospect watch.
Who do you think would win out of Rosas and Saaiman?
That's a really interesting one. I think that Rosas would probably win the first round, but I think if he didn't finish him in the first round, it would get dicey. So I'll probably go Rosas round 1 there. But I think it would get dicey if it got extended. I think Saaiman can fight a longer, dirtier fight than Rosas, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. It's just somebody mentioned it in the comments. Yeah, I like what you were saying about the age, man. I even put a tweet out about it, about the last card. We had Aldrich 31, Vanessa 35, Menes 32, Carolina 37, all winning. Like, age matters in certain spots. Like you were saying, like this week we have Elkins 39, Yoder 35. It matters because they're old as fuck and they're on their way out, man. It's just weird to me that people would necessarily bet the younger fighter over the older fighter every time. It's like, no, it's not every time. There's caveats to that, man. So yeah, I just think it's important to mention.
For sure. And I think that it's all about price as well. If you're getting an older fighter, but they're being priced like they have no chance to win, it's like, well, that's not accurate. But then if they're saying like the older fighters are guaranteed to win, you're like, well, long-term trends suggest that's probably not true. So maybe I take a poke on the underdog out of principle. That's the kind of betting that I would do. Not just like, oh, I'm going to blind fade this one angle long-term. You got to pick your spots always in this game. But speaking of picking your spots, I have no, conceivable interest unless there's a really standout prop on betting this next fight. And you know why, Rich? Because this last time that they ran this out, it kind of went the way that I expected, but it all happened in a more condensed time frame. I thought eventually Lacerda was going to start making mistakes and get submitted, right? And he put himself in a pretty dangerous guillotine. Granted, I don't know that it was the most perfect guillotine you'll ever see. Seemed to be effective enough. The guy's arm went a little limp in that spot, but overall, he was able to quickly recover there. I think that Chairez has pretty decent grappling, but he was getting taken down, held down in that spot. And I talk about this as a long-term angle for me. Betting rebooked fights is just something that's harder to do. It's not to say you can't win. It's not to say you can't profit. It's just to say the bookmaker has all the advantages where they've seen everybody's sharp money come in. They know how people were betting this fight live at the time. So they're going to have a much more structured approach to this. And I think you're going to have to get contrarian, which is hard to do when we just saw this fight play out a few weeks back. So, Rich, how do you feel about this one, man?
Yeah, nothing major, man. It's surprising to me that the Chairez KO is less than the submissions plus 250, which I think is wild, considering that sub was locked in. He might not have been asleep yet, but he was going to sleep. It was deep as fuck, man. I guess the angle on this one is to take Chairez in round 2 and 3. I do think now that Lacerda has seen that the takedowns can come early, he will be implementing them. He'd be stupid not to. I guess you're just banking on him to be safe for a round whilst doing that, which I think is probably likely. I don't want any action myself. It's a bullshit fight, but yeah, Chairez round 2 or 3 probably locks in a sub again, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's what I thought last time, and then the whole thing was like a car crash from the beginning. I think Lacerda, if he's smart here, will go for takedowns and try and just control on top. But we've not seen evidence yet that he's smart. So, it's a wait and see approach. God bless him. Should be a fun fight, but no interest for me at this point. Next up, we got Michel Pereira taking on Andre Petroski. And I think that if I'm not mistaken, you were saying in my first look chat section that you couldn't let me bet Petroski in this spot. And listen, I understand, man. Maybe it's my Renzo Gracie biases here, but I'll tell you what, Andre Petroski for me has been a guy that I've regretted not betting more on him in the past. I bet him against Nick Maximov. He was a big underdog in that spot. People are thinking he's not as good a grappler. He's not as good with the cardio. And he just insta-killed the guy, like choked him right unconscious and put him to sleep. And I think that was benefited by the fact that other guy wanted to grapple with him. But even still, he was able to just easily get that finish. I think that his strength and his physicality is something serious at 185 pounds. He's a really broad-shouldered guy. He's got power to lift and return on takedowns. And I look at a guy like Michel Pereira, and I think of a guy that likes to weight bully people a little bit, who likes to be the bigger guy, who likes to be able to go, and just like make people run away from him because of his size. And I do think he's got some power in his hands, but he hasn't been recording many knockouts or knockdowns recently in the UFC. He's lost to an effing featherweight. Are we forgetting about Tristan Connolly going out there and beating this guy? And so I think to myself, Michel Pereira is definitely getting better, but I've been talking about this as an angle for me, Rich. When somebody misses weight and F's up a card, they cause headaches for the matchmakers. I think they try and put them in a situation where they get beat, where they get embarrassed, where they go against a guy that's less known, that's not as big a star in the division, not as highly ranked, but is a terrible stylistic matchup. And in this case, they're actually forcing him to go up from 170 to 185 pounds and take on a primary grappler, which he has not had to do yet in the UFC, that also has a good submission game. And frankly, on the feet, he's got some power as well. And we've seen Dusko Todorovic, of all people, send this guy to the land of wind and ghosts on the regional scene. So I just think to myself, Michel Pereira, not a bad fighter, but at 185 pounds, what's his track record? It's kind of average. So I think of him as a guy that's a little bit exploitable potentially in this spot. I thought at 170, he did have some upside because he's huge, right? And I just thought, you give him a Wonder Boy or something like that, he should be able to barrel him over to the floor and submit him, frankly. But in this spot, I'm like, is he really going to do that to Andre Petroski? I don't see that. And I think that the losses for Andre Petroski have aged out okay. Aaron Jeffries, he's still a relevant fighter. He's not the best guy in the world, but he's still relevant. Brian Battle, he's lighting the world on fire now at 170 pounds after dropping down, had some real wins at 185. So for me, I like Andre Petroski to potentially upset the apple cart here. And I do think he has a submission game that could win him this fight. So Andre Petroski is the pick for me early on, and I'm going to do a little more due diligence. I can't remember seeing many instances of Michel Pereira grappling. I know he's done a good job defending takedowns, but I just think that Petroski is probably the biggest, strongest guy he's fought so far in the UFC. So wouldn't be surprised if he just picks him up and barrels him sideways in the air. What do you think about this one, Rich?
Do you think Petroski is a win is contingent on him getting a submission, or do you think he could wrestle for the 3 rounds and get a decision?
It'll be a greasy one if it goes off 15. Because we have seen Michel's turn up on people a little bit in round 3 before, but I also think that Pereira is he fits the category of a head case idiot to me as well, because of that Diego Sanchez fight, where he's like starting to turn up the pressure on him and then just goes, just knees him into oblivion and gets disqualified. I was like, oh my God, this freaking guy. So for me, the Connolly stunt, as well as the other stunt, makes me think it's kind of a wash. But yeah, I do think it would be a greasier fight over 15 for sure. I think Petroski's most live in the first 7, especially on short notice.
Yeah, I'm all over Pereira here, and KO round 2 and 3. I think it's going to be a body kick TKO for Pereira. I like the move up to 185, whether it was he was made to do it or not. I don't think cutting weight is good for fighters. I'm one of those who believe, you should fight around your natural weight class, you're less compromised, etc. Petroski, this one at late notice isn't going to bode well for him, in my opinion. I love fight doesn't go the distance as well. I had GM3 by KO in that fight and almost got it in round 3, and he's old as fuck and slow with his striking, and that was almost on as well. Pereira's a black belt, so I don't think he's going to get subbed. That's not too deep because I know Maximov is an accomplished grappler and he got subbed, but he didn't respect Petroski, man. He thought he was the superior grappler and went with a sloppy takedown. I don't think Michel's going to do that. I think he's going to play it safe. He's going to have movement. He's going to be too elusive. And like I said, he throws them teep kicks to the body, man. And I just see one of them catching and, him getting a TKO. And to your point, man, Diego Sanchez, Tristan Connolly, they were some bullshit performances, but they were back in the day. He is on a 4-fight win streak against some semi-decent competition like Chaos Williams, when Chaos Williams was hot for a minute after KOing some people. So I do think he's come into his own. I think he's learning from each fight against strikers as well, yet to be TKO'd. So yeah, it's all uphill for Pereira in this one. I don't see many pluses for Petroski, especially the late notice man. He's a gasser. In my opinion, he's a jiu-jitsu guy playing MMA. Not a good striker at all. He just wings some bombs in round one until he gasses. He's just fortunate from the matchups that he's had, man. Maximov, who didn't respect him. Yao Huzong, that Chinaman. That fight was disgusting. It took him 3 rounds to get his submission. So yeah, say no more. I love the Pereira side, man.
Interesting. So a little bit of dissension on the panel here. I think that this guy is pretty dangerous with the grappling. He has wins over Phil Hawes and Eric Anders. And I remember people were saying like, bro, this isn't jujitsu to me when I was talking about Joe Pyfer's wins on the grappling circuit. But it's like, yeah, but he's beating UFC level guys and they're all trying to do the same thing here, which is, hold people down, not get held down and look for the chokes. And in a lot of these grappling matches, because they're so evenly matched, you don't see the finish. Eric Anders is a guy that I think's been submitted twice in pro MMA, and once was by Muniz via falling armbar. So it's not like he's a guy that's just an easy mark, and he did submit him as well with that anaconda choke. It's one of his best maneuvers. So that's what I'll be looking for. I did cash one time that sub one plus 2,500. I put $5 on it. I wanted to cry because I was like, why did I not put $500? I would have been a rich man. But in any case, Andre Petroski, that's how I'd look to target it here. To your point, I do think the short notice, not to his favor here, but we've also seen that Pereira is a guy that has been out for quite some time. So he's going to be making some adjustments, I think, himself in the first round to get used to being back in the octagon. I remember thinking before the Thompson fight, I think it was like a year outside the octagon, and then that fight ended up getting canceled. So now it's probably been about 12, 13 months. I'd have to look back, but either way, he's going to have to shake off a little rust, and hopefully Andre Petroski is putting him in the choke before that happens. But I know we'll be on opposite sides there, but we're definitely agreeing on this fight not to go the distance because while I think Petroski could do that, I think it's a very small percentage outcome. I think more often than not, somebody's getting finished here.
The grappling matches that he had with Hawes and he had with Eric Anders, do you think if there was MMA fights, he'd still have won those?
The one with Eric Anders, for sure. Yeah, actually, yeah, I think he'd win both of those. I think
he'd lose both, but who knows?
Let's see him. Hopefully we get one of those next, win or lose. But in any case, we got a very fun featured bout here, my man. And I'm curious to see what you think of this one because Jonathan Martinez is coming back here to take on Adrian Yanez. And you got two guys that have a little bit of different momentum, right? Adrian Yanez kind of had that hype train derailed, as people would like to say, where his last fight out, he was favored to beat Rob Font, a staple of the division. A guy that had been on the receiving end of a bunch of knockdowns. And so people were starting to doubt his chin and his durability. And he went out there, took some hard shots from Yanez, but was able to deliver that decisive blow. So, in any case, we're looking now at Jonathan Martinez. He's got the opposite kind of momentum, Rich. He's been on a very lengthy win streak now, I think 5 fights in a row. He's done a good job of accruing some good names along the way. But he's also been flatlined, knocked out in the UFC before by Davey Grant in a fight that nobody saw coming. So he's not a guy that's been consistent money, delivering every time out, but he's certainly been showing his best product to date over his recent performances. So how do you feel about this matchup? Closely aligned fight, and a lot of opinions flying in both ways on the Twitter sphere.
Yeah, to be honest, this fight and the next one, I didn't really have much, but I've had time since and gone back and looked at it. I think Martinez, in the fights that he's won, I think he's a good all-rounder, Martinez, but not particularly good at anything. And I think he just fights, he picks the easiest path to victory. Like when he fought Said Nurmagomedov, he was the better striker in that fight. Said tried to push his grappling on him, and he really surprised me, Martinez, with his defensive grappling and his wrestling, reversing positions. So I think he's the type of fighter to just wait to see what you bring, and he tries to negate it. But I think Yanez is the far better striker. I think he's got far better hands. And I don't trust that Martinez is going to go in there with the game plan to take him down and wrestle him, which he should. Because if you want to beat Yanez, that's how you do it, unless you're Rob Font. He's susceptible to the wrestling. You can see that in the early days when he fought that guy, Levi Moles, who I've capped a couple of times. I've had to look at his record. Pilate, Miles Johns, which was a war. So I guess the Yanez side, but for me, no action on this fight. I hear people talking about Yanez KO, which won't surprise me. He is hittable. Martinez, even Saeed was touching him up on the feet a little bit. I don't think he can take the shots from Yanez. We've seen him be KO'd before by David Grant, which wasn't a great look. So I guess Yanez, but you know, I'm not putting my stamp on this fight, to be honest. I'm staying away, but I guess Yanez, man.
Yeah, I feel like Yanez is probably the side in this fight as well. I think that Jonathan Martinez, he's a good fighter, but I do think that the line is being a little bit inflated by the fact that Adrian Yanez lost his last fight. If you want to know one predictive measure of somebody to be undervalued their next fight, it's that they just lost by knockout in the first round. It's like that will make people sell stock so quickly your head would spin. Now, does that mean he's a guarantee to come back and win here? No, he's got to overcome some things. He just got knocked out. He's got to come back and he's got to deal with that. He's got to come back and deal with the fact that that's going to be on the highlights this week. People are going to be talking about that. And he's in a featured position as well. So it's not like he can run and hide from it. He's going to be in some media this week. But I kind of like what I've seen from him. He's talking about, no, I'm going to correct people and let them know my name is Yanez. And like he's letting people know he's confident still. I like that about him, and he's a guy that he needed a little bit of that humbling. I think he had been out there in a lot of fights and putting his chin on the line against some guys. We saw that against what's the guy's name from Massachusetts area? Pulling it up right now. Randy Costa. He went out there against Randy Costa and he kind of let him hang around a little bit too long with those head kicks and with the long punches. And I think that's another fight that if he had gotten knocked out there, he would have learned from that. But instead, he went through it. So he's like, no, I can get into these exchanges. I can make it a war. And he was doing well, landing good punches on Rob Font. But Rob Font comes from a primary boxing gym. It's one of the only gyms that can really compete punch for punch in boxing exchanges with a guy like Yanez. And I think that that was a mistake. You also look, Yanez has been through some personal turmoil in the lead up to that fight. He had lost his coach. He had been trying to arrange his own camps and his own gym and figuring everything out for himself. That's a lot of stuff for a young fighter to be dealing with on their own. I feel like in this spot, he's going to get back to basics. I feel like he's going to show more of what we're conventionally used to seeing from him. And it's not like Rob Font was out there kicking him to death. It was Rob Font beat him with the boxing. I think that it would be unlikely for Martinez to beat him with the boxing. I think Martinez is going to have to beat him with the kicks, or he's going to have to mix up the fight in some other way, because I think Yanez is a cleaner boxer with more power in his hands. And I think that the chin of Martinez is a little bit susceptible. So for me, give me Adrian Yanez here. I think the decision line at plus 400 is a little bit interesting because I think that Yanez has shown he doesn't have to go chase the finish. He did that against Davey Grant. He had the fight where it went the distance, as opposed to Jonathan Martinez got a little bit overzealous and then got straight arm chin checked all the way back to England from Davey Grant. So I think that this is a fight where the KO could happen. It's favored to happen as far as the odds are concerned, but this is still a fight between 135 pounders. One of them got knocked out in the first round last time out. So maybe he's going to be a little more conservative, try and pick his shots, land better shots, and just win rounds against a guy like Martinez. So should be a good scrap here. But I'm definitely leaning the Yanez side.
Yeah, do you know what? I'm changing my pick. I'm going Martinez by decision, plus 300. I just seen the line on Yanez TKO. It's really shit, man. And I think Martinez is from a good camp. Like you said, he's going to do the low kicks, going to keep the distance. If he comes into range, into boxing range, he's going to get fucked because Yanez has the faster hands. But I think from being from a good camp, he's going to keep that distance, man. And yeah, like you said, the Randy Costa fight, man, he was landing them head kicks all day. Yanez didn't like them. And I could see Martinez employing that. So, yeah, I'll change my pick, man. I'll go for Martinez by decision.
Fair play. So that one, I'm not, I'm not super sold, but leaning towards the Yanez side. I think he's a little bit more marketable. But in any case, next up, we got Jennifer Maia taking on Viviane Araújo. This is a fight where it seems like the whole world is on Jennifer Maia, but the line's not really reacting. So for me, that would be an indication to look towards the underdog. I do think that with a girl like Viviane Araújo, she's a little bit spotty and inconsistent with her performances, but at her best, she could definitely go out there and land some good shots. She can, throw good strikes. And I think that Jennifer Maia has gotten off on a bunch of shots against some girls that are a little bit less experienced, a little bit more green. I do think both these women have pretty similar level of experience, despite Maia having more fights. Maya's been showing the better form to date in her recent performances, but I just think that if they both were to show up at their best, Viviane Araújo could compete, make this a pick'em type price. So not a fight I'm very bullish on, but could I imagine putting a half unit on Araújo if she gets out to, plus 150, plus 175 type price? I could, because I thought she gave Alexa Grasso an honest run. What do you think about this one, Rich?
Yeah, I don't see how you can be confident in either of these girls, man. Both super old for women's MMA, both kind of similar. I'm not touching it, but I guess Araújo would be the side as the underdog. One thing I also look at when capping fights is the market and the placement of these fighters on a card. And I think this is like, I don't know, the parlay buster type one. I didn't realize so many people were on Maia, to be honest, as a favorite. I think that's kind of stupid at the price tag. But yeah, considering I like all the favorites in the main card, I guess I'd take Araújo as the underdog in this one. But yeah, I don't really have anything, like I said, on this one and the Yanez fight. I don't really care, man. I've got other bets.
Fair play. And that would put us at, a couple disagreements along the way. But I do think that the parlay buster is most likely to come from Araújo, Yanez, Petroski, that like section of the card, that meaty portion of the main card, because I am leaning towards the favorite in the main event here. And we'll get into that in just 1 second. But what I want to say is, guys, if you're watching the show right now, appreciate each and every person that is tuned in. Go ahead and drop a like on the video. Let us know who you're rocking with, whether that's in the live chat right now or in the comments section below, because we are about to tune into this main event. And if you're not subscribed already, make sure that you do that as well, because we're talking about fights on this channel each and every week. So without further ado, let's get into the main event of the evening. Super Sodiq Yusuff taking on Edson Jr. Barboza. Both these guys coming off impressive first-round finishes, Rich. I think that's why we are into this main event territory for these guys. You saw Sodiq Yusuff, yes, it was against Don Chairez. However, there's nothing he could do about that, right? He showed up for his job. He can only take who they give him. And in that spot, I believe it was a short notice replacement. Don Chairez comes into the fight, and Sodiq landed a bunch of big knees to the body and caught him in a front headlock scenario, instantly guard pulled that guillotine, and it was a wrap. I have to say, as a guillotine connoisseur, that was beautiful. That was a perfect guillotine. When you talk about what a guillotine is supposed to be used for, if you guillotine and guard pull and you're flat on your back and you don't get it, now you screwed yourself. Where did he end up? On his hip. So he could have scrambled to the top position and ended up mounting the guy and finishing him there if he wanted to. But instead, he knew he had it locked in. He kept it on his hip. He finished the job. I think that showed the Team Lloyd Irvin seasoning. I think it showed exactly what he's been working on the mat for all this time, because we already know what he could do on the feet. The viral knockouts he's had pre-UFC, you could go watch him. He's insanely powerful when he's able to get off on his strikes, when he's able to get off on his punches in particular, carries a lot of power in his hands. However, we've seen his chin be a little bit of a liability. I talked about that on my first look, where we've seen him get wobbled. We've seen him get rocked. We've seen that cost him the Arnold Allen fight, arguably, where he landed more shots. He was looking more effective, winning the minutes of the fight. And then in an instant, he would lose the round by getting dropped, by getting stunned, wobbled. There was one point where he was like standing there looking off in the distance, but he's got very good recoverability. Even in the fight where he recorded that knockout loss, his opponent hit an arm spin, slammed him right onto his face, and then threw probably 4 or 5 strikes directly to the back of his cranium. And this guy still was able to get up and like look at the referee after and like try and protest the stoppage a little bit. So overall, I think that his recoverability is very good. His chin is a little bit concerning against a guy like Edson. But what Edson tends to do is he likes to back up a little bit, try and find his range, try and set down on big shots and big opportunities. And I think Sodiq Yusuff's going to pressure him backwards. I think he's going to walk him onto the cage. And we've seen that a lot bother Edson Barboza. This is a small octagon. He does not have as much room to operate and move around here. And we've seen guys like Kevin Lee few other guys use pressure to close him down and then take him down. But I think that Sodiq Yusuff's probably going to use pressure to close him down, throw big shots. And what we see from Edson is he does not like the feeling of being pressured. So he will either react by getting into exchanges that don't favor him, where his hands come down and he starts throwing wildly, where he got dropped by a jab from Donald Cerrone, club and sub finish in that spot. Or if you look at that Tony Ferguson fight, guys, the reason that I talk about his club and sub potential is the fact that it was not Tony Ferguson who initiated the grappling in that fight. It was Edson Barboza. He was under duress. He was getting hit with too many shots. He did not like how he was feeling, and the power was backing him up. So then he said, I'm going to shoot for a takedown. He shot for a takedown, snapped down, and then he tried to stand back up, front headlock, snap down again. When he went to stand up the third time, there was no dice. Darth City, it was all over. So you look at Edson Barboza, the problem is that when he gets pressured, he can make mistakes that cause him to get submitted. And he's only been submitted twice. He's had a lengthy UFC career, but a lot of guys are looking to break him down with pressure and offense on the top position with ground and pound. I think that's a possibility here, but they're giving you a plus 600, plus 700, whatever it is, on Sodiq Yusuff to win the fight by submission. And I think in his last fight, he showed he does not discriminate. However you want to get it, he'll try and give it to you. So I like Sodiq Yusuff in this spot. I think he's going to win the fight, and I think he's dangerous to finish the fight as well. How do you feel about this one, Rich?
Yeah, we both like Sodiq, man, and I'm very surprised by the line. I would have expected him to be minus 200, minus 250. Somebody mentioned the injury. He had some herniated discs, and that's why he's been off for a while. I think he's going to be good from that. I don't think he'd take this fight if he wasn't fully recovered. He seems to be okay. I guess grappling would be a concern because of that injury, but I don't see any grappling taking place in this fight. I think it's going to look a lot like Sodiq versus Mike Davis on Dana White's Contender Series, where Sodiq is literally in his face, throwing the calf kicks and looking to throw big shots on the feet, man. And people seem to forget Edson got dropped by Cerrone by a jab, and then got subbed thereafter. He was getting dropped by Bryce Mitchell, which is just embarrassing because Bryce hasn't got hands. He's a grappler. So I'm not seeing any upside for Edson here. Like you said, small cage. I don't think he's going to have the room anyway to throw these spinning head kicks or any flashy shit like that. I think Sodiq knows the assignment here. He's going to stay in range where those kicks aren't effective. And Sodiq round 1 or 2 for me all day. I think he's going to knock him out, man. We had a chat. So I think this was the only fight we had a chat about where you were saying the club and sub is on. That does kind of concern me a little bit. I did overlook that, to be honest. But yeah, I do think it is probably a TKO, man, for Sodiq in this one.
Yeah, and I think that the thing that we agree on is that Sadiq's going to come forward, clubbing him with hooks and try and really force this fight into a position where Edson goes down, and we've seen other guys have success doing that. Justin Gaethje comes to mind as another example where he was able to finish him via TKO by coming forward, pressuring really hard, disrespecting the offense, and then swinging over the top with a big hook and making the finish materialize. But when I look at this, I do think that Sodiq has continued to work on that ground game, and that makes me think that he's not afraid to show it off. He says in all the interviews, if you listen, he says, yeah, I'm going to knock him out. I'm going to do this. He's like, unless Edson wants to wrestle. And I was like, Edson's going to want to wrestle, in my opinion, as soon as this fight starts getting real nitty gritty. Because the other thing is, I like Edson Barboza's cardio at 155 pounds much better than I like it at 145 pounds. I liked his chance to get better at MMA, better at 155 pounds than at 145 pounds. How is this man not dedicating his entire camp to cutting the weight, Rich? Because he's huge, right? He's always been big. He was big at 55. Nobody was looking at Edson Barboza like, man, this guy's tiny. That was never the problem. So he's a big guy. He's cutting a lot of weight, and he's all muscle. And it's hard to fuel muscle for 25 minutes. So I just think he's going to struggle to pace himself here. We saw that against Giga Chikadze. He was looking like he was having some success leading into the third round, and then the gas just wasn't there to keep backing it up. So I feel like we've seen examples of this happening to him in the past at 145. Billy Q never was able to really get off on his game. He was able to land a couple clean strikes, but when he went for the shot, fight was over like that. I think that's just, something that happens in MMA. You know, it's a high variance sport. So give me Sodiq Yusuff here. I do think that the fight not to go is also probably the side, because I think that covers both of the most likely outcomes here, which would be Sodiq getting the finish or Edson Barboza knocking him out. I mean, he is a very dangerous knockout threat. Don't want to disrespect that either. I think that's his best chance to win the fight. I don't think Edson's going to be trying to, point fight him to a decision. That's not who he is. So for me, like the fight not to go, and I like Sodiq to get the job done inside the distance. Any closing thoughts here, Rich?
Yeah, do you know what, though? He's lost twice by submission to Cerrone, when Cerrone jabbed him and he dropped him and then he got the rear naked. And then the Tony fight, it was because Tony, that was it, the height of like Tony being Tony, and he put on an insane amount of pressure on him, volume. And I don't think Sadiq's going to do that, man. He's going to be more methodical, pick his punches, but he is going to apply pressure. But I just think the volume's going to be low to the point where it's not going to be a case of where he gasses Barboza and Barboza will desperation takedown. It's just going to be a point where Barboza either gets hit clean with something and then shells up and then, 1-2 punches and he dies. So yeah, that would be my only pushback on the submission play. But at the number, man, I don't hate it. Obviously, I could get burnt, man. He might follow him to the ground and decide to sink in a choke. But I just don't believe that Edson will push any type of grappling in this fight, man.
So I would never, like, if you had given me 10 guesses, like how Edson would react to Tony Ferguson, the last thing I would think is he's going to try and shoot takedowns. But that's exactly what he was doing, because he wasn't liking how things were going on the feet. I even think, and I didn't double check this, I have to fact check myself, I believe he shot a takedown on Gutierrez at one point, because he was like, yeah, maybe this is starting to go sideways. So I'm going to go back and fact check myself there. But I just feel like when Edson starts to feel a lot of pressure coming back at him, he's like, let me see if I'm the better grappler. I mean, maybe there's something else I could do here, but I just don't think that he likes to sit in those bad positions and like try and figure it out, problem solve like some fighters do. He's like, let me immediately go to the next option phase and see my way out from here if it's not working. But he's also a tough guy on the mat. I will say, Cerrone had to lock in the rear naked choke and put it in solid before he would go out. And the same thing with the fight that he had against Tony. You can see blood is like squirting from his face, and he's still trying to push away at the hips. Like, he's not just a quitter, but I do think that he puts himself in bad front headlock scenarios. And I think if there was one place I would credit Sadiq's grappling, it would be from the front headlock. So that's why I was interested. But I do think it's a little bit high variance. I would be more bullish on the ITD than I would be on the sub, but I just think that the sub is the value at the number. But in any case, my man, we've done it. That's all of the 12 fights that are slated for UFC Vegas 81. Want to give you a chance, let people know where they could find you. We do have, of course, your information linked down below in the description. I hope you guys all check that out. But Rich, please let the people know.
Yeah, same as what I was saying at the beginning of the show. Check me out on Twitter. Link to the Patreon in the bio. Running a promo for November. It's $12 for the Patreon. Discord group, the rest of it. Yeah, good luck with your bets, man.
Appreciate it. You too. And because we're seeing the board the same way, I think that a lot of our outcomes are going to be looking the same. So prayers up for both of us that it's a profitable weekend, and in the spots we disagree, hopefully those hedge plays come through for both of us no matter what. But in any case, should be a great night of fights. I'm looking forward to these scraps. If you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can go ahead and fire those off in the comment section below. Appreciate everybody who's rocked with us in the chat. Very active comment section today. Very active from everybody. So appreciate all you guys that are rocking with us, the regulars, some new folks as well. God bless each and every one of you guys. Good luck with all of your bets. And if you guys need anything more from me, you can find me everywhere at Liam Picks Fights. That's on Twitter, Instagram, Patreon, and all these other places. So if you got questions, comments, or concerns, many places to reach us. Thanks very much for tuning into the show. Come back next time. We're having all the same fun again. Take care, everybody.